We're waiting for what's his name? Christian is his name?
Yeah. Oh,
All
there he
right.
is.
There he is.
Yeah, here I
Okay.
am. Hello.
All right. Okay, well, might as well get started. I'm gonna begin by saying what motivated me to contact you guys. And that's the fact that you have the words Aztlan Libre associated with your work. And all three of my daughters have their last name as Aztlan, and my grandchildren have their last name Aztlan. So I can still remember I was uh let's see how old was I? I was 16 years old when El Plan Espiritual de Aztlan was first written and published. And I remember really like like somebody had given me a surprise birthday party or something. And to know that the concept, the idea, and the aspiration is still alive today in guys like you. So, Christian, is that your name?
Yes.
All right. Well, why don't we begin by you guys introducing yourselves? Christian, we can begin with you. Say a little bit about yourself and what kind of work you do in and out of your house.
All right, for sure. Well, my name is Christian. I do a lot of community organizing and community work. Currently, I'm the chairman for the Aztlan Youth Brigade, which is a youth organization that we have here in San Diego. We pull from all different parts of San Diego as youth, come together to organize our community and to give back to our community. I know you mentioned the Plan Espiritual de Aztlan, and that's something that we mention, forever and always in the work that we do. Besides that, I'm an artist. I like to tap into different mediums, whether that's like oil or acrylic. Yeah, that's pretty much sums up some of the work that I do.
As someone who works with the Aztlan Youth Brigade, how old are you? Or how young are
I
you?
am I'm 19 years old, freshly 19. I turned 19 in November.
That's quite young. That's quite young. Lucas, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit of what you do.
Yeah, my name is Lucas Cruz. I'm a co-founder of Aztlan Libre and Galeria Mestizaje, located here in Logan Heights, and I'm also the founder of Aztlan Archives. And the initiative Aztlan Archives is we're looking at documenting and telling our own history, and I work with a lot of the youth, such as Christian and other members of the Youth Brigade, to scan through my grandmother's collection. My grandmother, she saved documents from like 1969 up until about 2019. So it's been my goal to digitize it and make it accessible for everybody that may want to tap in and learn that Chicano history. But I do want to share quickly that Christian also started with us at 16 years old. He was coming
Uh,
around and he started with the brigade at 16.
let me ask you then, let's begin with the brigade. How was it founded? What's the purpose? What does it do?
For sure. So the brigade was originally a concept that came in like late 2021, like December. I remember I had stumbled into Patricia and Lucas in the park. We were just taking photos, and I began to ask questions. And then Patricia introduced me, which is Lucas's wife. Wife, sorry, Patricia introduced me to Raquel, who was actually one of the founding members alongside me and three other individuals, Jocelyn, Pedro, Jose Luis. We were kind of the founding members, and it was mostly because there was this call for a youth component within the Chicano movement to continue to involve our youth in this conversation about Chicanismo and continue to, move that spirit of self-determination forward. And then 2022, beginning actually January, is when we had officially declared ourselves the Asan Youth Brigade. And the name was inspired by the Chicano cadets, and we wanted to pay homage to that history and pay homage to the militancy while also keeping a sense of spirituality with the name Aslan within the name. And the purpose of it is to continue to serve our community, but also to educate ourselves. The goal with the Aslan Youth Brigade is that it serves as a gateway, almost like a stepping stool for other forms of activism, and hopefully, the goal is that our members branch off into different organizations that do a lot of the work that has to do with activism and Chicanismo. And just to continue to share that history with our community that for so long has been kept from us. So just wanting to put that history back into the people's hands and continue to support whatever aspirations they have, making sure that it's always centered in a Chicano viewpoint.
Lucas, I want you to comment on, or like for you to comment on, three concepts that Christian just brought up. One is the militancy. Two is the idea of spirituality. And three, how is the concept of Aztlan, how do you work it these days after over 40 years since it was first voiced?
With the militancy component, we feel it's really important for that spirit of self-determination and being able to stand up. You know, in a lot of the work that we did early on with a lot of security work for within the park. So myself, I'm the former chairman of the Toronto Park Steering Committee, and I've been involved in the park all my life. My grandmother was a co-founder of the park and was there at the takeover. And that's where, you know, myself, I learned a lot of those principles of self-determination, of my Chicanismo, and the importance of, you know, standing up, whether it's viewed how do I say, like in I guess legal sense it or not. So, you know, I grew up, we were blocking streets, you know, we were cutting streets down, we would lead marches, we wouldn't work with the police. And it's that spirit of self-determination we wanted the youth to be able to carry, where if you're doing something right and it's for your community, you do what you got to do. You know, we're not encouraging these kids to get involved in anything stupid or to react violently or anything. It's a matter of self-defense, but also being willing to step up where you have to defend your community. And you know, the militancy, it also came from, we had the Jose Gomez Brigade here at the park. So it's these spirits of like, they're the gatekeepers, they're the ones that are doing the cleaning, the organizing, the labor, but then they're also there to make sure they're at the front lines with the kids. And it's difficult working with youth and having that component. So it's a matter of teaching the responsibility as they're younger. And then as they get older, that's where we start, because the brigade starts from 12 years old and it goes up. Well, even actually, we have some kids that we've been working with that are like 7, and it goes up until about 24 is when they age out. And it's to have that bridge where there's the kids who are able to work in that activism and that are learning. And then there's also the younger kids that are coming in for the more educational components, the volunteerism and the art components also. And in terms of the spirituality, my wife, she really, she helps ground us. So we do a lot of, you know, different work and trying to reclaim our roots. You know, like we teach the kids about the copalero and learning about intention and prayer and the importance of grounding ourselves, because a lot of the work we do, it's heavy. And we, unfortunately, in our communities, there's lots of issues with substance abuse. There's lots of issues with violence. There's lots of issues with police brutality. And in order for us to be able to serve our community well, we have to be able to take care of ourselves spiritually and also provide the tools to others to be able to do that. So in our space, you know, we do like sound baths, we do meditations, we offer copal, sage, you know, different tools that people can access, and we teach about it. Because a lot of times right now we see this trend of this desire to learn about healing, and it's usually geared towards Eastern medicine and other traditions, and it's great. But we're letting our raza know that, hey, we have our own traditions too, and we can reground ourselves in that spirituality. And in terms of the what was the last component?
Aztlan.
Aslan. Aslan, that for us is our goal. You know, Aslan, you know, the definition, at least in our perspective, has evolved over time. I know at a certain point it was the people viewed it as the southwestern region of the United States, and through conversations with people like Tupac and other elders, we realized that, you know, putting a border on top of a border is just the same type of colonial mindset. So for us, it's more so the goal, you know, a liberated place where all people can be free. You know, other people call it Turtle Island. We like to use Aslan. So for us, it's more of like this spiritual homeland. And it's also like there's an educated Chicano. We're in Aztlan, you know, Aztlan Libre. That's our goal. And we love the name of the space because even people don't know what that means, they're saying it. And we believe in that power of manifestation too. When people read the sign, people ask all these questions, Aztlan is being said and spoken into existence.
Before we will continue, it's, you know, a lot of people, believe it or not, aren't aware of the history of Chicano Park. Can you just summarize it? Because that's a very important element to our history.
Yeah. So the community of Logan Heights was, you know, primarily Mexicano, Black, Asian, and some Italian
This is in
families.
San Diego, right? San
Yep,
Diego?
in San Diego. They're located in San Diego. And the reason the community was made up that way is because of redlining. And because of the redlining, a lot of the communities there were viewed as like a dumping ground. So instead of the city putting junkyards anywhere else, they put them in our community. We got the freeway that cut through the neighborhood, and then in 1969, the Coronado Bridge was built and divided the community in half and separated into different sections. And now we're dealing with these issues later down the line with these issues of planning where Logan Heights was once one community, extended up to Sherman, Shelltown, and East Village. And now, because of that separation of the freeway and the bridge, all these barrios that were all once together are all now fighting each other. Shelltown don't get along with Sherman, Sherman don't get along with Logan, even though at one point it was all Logan Heights. So with all that history in mind and all this cutting and division, people started demanding a park. We want a park for our community to be able to enjoy some green space, to enjoy an area of community. And the city told him, yeah, we'll give you a park. But on April 22nd, 1970, there was a brown beret by the name of Mario Solis. And he's walking down Logan Avenue, going towards City College, and he notices the construction happening in the area designated for the park. So he stops and asks him and says, hey, what are you guys making? And are you guys making the park? And they said, no, we're making a highway patrol station. And with the history of the police in our community, it was a big slap to the face. So when he heard that, he ran up and down and started putting the word out. They called him the Paul Revere Chicano Park. And he put the word out to students, to families, to everybody. And before you knew it, 300 people occupied the land. And it was a 12-day occupation. And, one of the people that were there is my grandmother. She was there with my mother at 2 years old. And there were others there like Jose Gomez, Victor Ochoa, and many, many people. It was over 300 throughout that process. And then eventually it was decided that the state would give the land over to the city through a lease in order for it to be a park. And since then, 54 years later, Chicano Park has been community controlled thanks to the work of the Chicano Park Steering Committee. And, we have the annual Chicano Park Day. We hold different ceremonies there throughout. We were fortunate enough to have Peace and Dignity Journey come in 1992 and bring one of the staffs to Chicano Park. And, it's also been the hub of a lot of Chicanismo in San Diego and revolutionary spirit. A lot of the protests going on, I know early 2000s with a lot of the immigration issues up until now, people need a spot to go and rally. It's Chicano Park. It's the first place they think of.
All right. Christian, going back to the day and the struggle today, tell us a little bit about the brigades and Lucas says that there's some real young guys out there. What is it? What are the requirements? What is the process to become a brigadista and what kind of work do you do?
You're
You're
muted,
muted.
Christian.
My bad. Sorry about that. But with the brigade, like Lucas mentioned earlier, at times it can be a little bit difficult to work with youth just because their head might be in different spaces. And I think at times we as youth don't really see the value in our history up until later on when we start to see a lot of these components in society. But as far as the brigade goes, it's really the only real requirements that there is that to fit within the age category. Even sometimes we kind of bend those rules if we see that someone is very passionate about that spirit of self-determination and that spirit of learning. But it's that age requirement, and then we also ask that the person who wants to become a member shows up to 4 consecutive meetings or events. So we have a lot of social events. And the goal with the social events is to be able to pull in that youth with something that on the outside seems very fun and entertaining. And it is, we like to have a lot of fun, but we like to make it tied back to something political. And often, more than not, it is tied back to El Plan Espiritual de Aztlan. But with that, the only requirements are just 4 consecutive meetings or events and just be within that age category. And then when we initiate the member, the initiation process consists of giving a rap, which is something that we learned from one of our elders, Jesse Constancio. Well, and a rap is basically just giving someone a brief summary of the group and trying to recruit them. And the reason that we do that is because we want every single person in the group to understand the purpose of the group and to be able to deliver that message appropriately.
And how would you state the purpose of the group?
How would I state it? I think the
Somebody wants to
purpose.
be a member. So somebody wants to be a member.
So the purpose of the Aztlan Youth Brigade is it's a learning tool for Chicanos to learn the history and to find a path for them that works for them. A lot of times we get lost in the cycle of whether it's academia or sometimes even in our community work. But I think the Aztlan Youth Brigade serves as an anchor for the work that we do, and it serves as a home. It serves as a home for the Chicanos that may not have that support elsewhere. We'd like to provide that support for our people.
Can you give us some examples or one example of an activity that somebody would expect at one of your events?
Yeah, for sure. So with any of our events or activities, we always like to tailor them to the needs of the group and to the interests of the group. So for example, one of our members, Francisco, he's really into the hardcore punk scene. So for him, his Chicanismo looks a lot different than what ours looks like, but we like to tailor to that. So his approach was to have a hardcore show, an event here at Aztlan Libre, to have us host it, but in that show, have it be politically tied in some way, shape, or form. And we've had two so far. And in the first one, there was a lot of conversation about the bands and the actual topics that they were talking about. And in the second one, we gave space for other performers like Chicano de Oro or Juan Carlos to speak on to perform, but his music is very centered around Chicanismo. And then we also gave some spotlight for um, Talkan, who's one of our incarcerated brothers. And even on our weekly meetings, every other meeting, we have an educational presentation that has to do with some type of Chicanismo. For example, the one that we just had last week had to do on Zapatismo because of the anniversary of the Zapatistas on January 1st. And just synchronizing it to make it a lot more digestible for our youth. So, like I know Lucas was talking earlier about the history of the park, of our synchronization in that was the way currently El Tren Maya is splitting up the Zapatista. It's splitting right through Zapatista territory. So while us here in San Diego and as Chicanos, we may not have a train splitting through our territory or through our communities, we do have a freeway, and just synchronizing those two to making it a little bit more digestible for our youth. But those are some of the educational components that we have.
What kind of space do you use? Do you have a building? Do you have an office? Do you have how do you get people? How and where do you get people together?
So thanks to Lucas and Patricia, we actually have our meetings at Aztlan Libre every single week. And most of the events that we do are, I would say actually all of the events that we have are here at Aztlan Libre. Things like our food distributions are hosted here out of Aztlan Libre. That punk show that I just mentioned is also here in Aztlan Libre. The brigade has had some art shows in the past, and we have had Aztlan Libre be the space that we use, and we consider this our headquarters because no matter what, this is where we meet, and this is where we find a lot of the resources that we need to not just have our weekly meetings, but to have our events. You know, think something so simple as like a table is something that we may not all have, but we know if we come to Aslan, we'll definitely find it here.
Well, Lucas, tell us about that space. What is Aztlan Libre?
Yeah,
It's
so
a
Aztlan Libre, the building itself, originally was the Logan Inn back before the community started having those major shifts. It was one of the drinking establishments a lot of people went to. It shifted multiple times. And growing up, I remember it as the piñata shop, oddly enough. So I'd go by there and get my candy and soda. I never thought, 20 years later, I'd be in there operating my own community space with my wife. But the big issue we've been having in our neighborhood is with gentrification. We are a cultural district. We're also next to an historic landmark, and these are great achievements that we've reached. But if we take a step back and reflect, like, okay, as a regular resident in this community, what does that mean to me? It means higher rent. Now I live next to a national historic landmark. Now I live next to a cultural district. So because of that, a lot of the businesses have started, shifting throughout the block. A lot of them are coming in and then they're struggling to stay. Then they shift out because of rent increases and other various issues. So with that, we kept in mind, like, we could have another business here and just keep on doing what everyone else is doing, or we can really tailor it to the work that we love and dedicated ourselves to. So my wife actually operated the space before as a Copal y Tierra, and it was more of a healing space. It was her and two other women. And when they decided to not keep that going, we decided to keep the space, but we wanted to make it more, healing is very nuanced. Healing can be the copal, it can be the prayer, it can be the ceremony, but it can also be the Chicanismo conversations. It can also be the assistance in finding, housing. It can be the assistance in knowing that somebody is there that's willing to hear me out, may not have the answers, but is willing to guide me to the answers. So that space has started taking its shape. So from that piñata shop, next door to it is it was a car, like a what do you call it, an auto body shop. So the warehouse next to it, it goes directly from our shop. So if you come into the shop, you walk to the right, then there's a old warehouse that we turned into a gallery. So Aztlan Libre is like a small shop. It has some of the history on the wall, so you can come and see like past Chicano Park Day posters, flyers, pictures of Corky Gonzalez and other Chicano leaders. And then you go into the gallery, and it's that same spirit from the Plan de Aztlan. Like we create our own institutions, instead of begging Balboa Park and all these other art establishments to feature us as a subcategory or highlight us, we should be highlighting our own raza. We should be giving them that opportunity to show their works. So we created our own gallery, Galeria Mestizaje. And then if you step right past that, outside there's a lot. And again, it was definitely a fixer upper. It's just a large lot that had a whole bunch of, junk stored in it and everything. And over time we've been cleaning it up and using it as a space. So we have our outdoor placita area. So if you come and we have an event, you'll be able to walk through the entirety of the space. And it's perfect because people, they don't know what exactly is going on there. They'll see an event, they'll come, then they start asking those questions and we start getting that engagement. And a lot of the youth, they'll come by and they don't know what they're looking for. They're just coming through. And then when they start showing some interest, we introduce them to the kids that are there. And these kids, man, they're there all the time. They're there more than me. So they're always there. And it's beautiful because I'm telling you, like these kids, they choose to come on a Friday night to like scan the archives, to plan an art show, to meet and discuss rather than going out there and getting into some trouble.
What kind of a governance do you run by? How is the place not governed, but how do you delegate responsibility, authority, whatever to manage the actual structure or the actual group, the actual organization? Aztlan
So
Vive,
we have,
I imagine.
yeah, so Aztlan Libre is our space and it's our hub and our home. But me and my wife and we have a couple other brothers and sisters we work with. We have a group called Revolucionarios Aztlan, and we consider ourselves the parent organization of the Youth Brigade. And we say that because, we early on in the brigade's history, when we were working with the kids, we had to come at a crossroads. We're doing a lot of work with Chicano Park. We were discussing, should this be a group that is affiliated with the park directly? I was the chairman of the steering committee at the time. But the one thing that we didn't want the kids to lose is their autonomy. As a youth group, we've seen it time and time again where they'll come in and they're interested, but when it becomes this thing of servitude, where it's like, okay, you guys are gonna do this now, or before you do that, you have to ask permission. It turns them off because kids they just want to move. They have this excitement and this animal, and to respect that, we became the Aztlan Youth Brigade, and it was autonomous. But we as Revolucionarios, we serve as like guides, try to help them out where we can, and help teach them and bring them pretty much under our wings. So the Revolucionarios piece, we are the parent organization. We help the Youth Brigade in planning, providing the space, whatever they need, materials, supplies, for them to be able to organize their events. We manage the calendar. And so they just come through and ask us, can we do this? Can we do that? And we do it. And we're not a nonprofit. We're just a grassroots organization. Everything that we do, we either pay out of pocket, or if the shop does real well, then we're able to use the funds from there to be able to fund some of the events.
How do you make decisions? How do you come to a decision?
Usually collectively, so like me, my wife, and then the kids, we all meet and talk before we do anything. And we see like, is this something, one, that aligns with our values and what we want to do? And as Christian brought up some of those events, like you may hear like punk show, what does that have to do with anything? And it could easily become that. It can easily become a venue. And we're very strict. And like, if you're going to do something here, you need to be on that mic and implementing some history, some information, and use it as a call to action for people. That way it's kind of, we're passively engaging people as they come through. They're expecting one thing and they leave a little inspired, or they want to come back and follow up and get more information. And oddly enough, through the punk shows, we've gotten some recruits.
Well, I'd like to shift that question over to Christian. Okay, how do you guys make decisions? How do you what kind of organizational structure do you have for the brigade?
So as far as the brigade, we do have a mesa, we have a board. We have a chairman, a vice chair, a sergeant of arms. There's two positions. There's the woman and the male sergeant of arms. We have a secretary and a historian, as well as a treasurer. So those are kind of the main components of the group as far as board members go. But even something so simple as any decisions we're going to make within our meeting and deciding something so simple as like what's going to be published on our social media. Since I'm the current chairman, and even historically in the brigade's past, we have always ran that by the group itself, whether that is in person in our meetings or if something comes up, earlier on in the week, we bring that up in our group chat where we, discuss, and we make those decisions collectively. If there is a decision that has to be made outside of that, we always communicate those decisions back to the group, just so that they're also in the loop and they also understand what's happening. It's a very collective effort, and we focus a lot on, community work and making sure that we're discussing within ourselves, making sure that we're all on the same page. But for a majority, a lot of it is, just within ourselves talking, but also making sure that the board has their stance.
Long before you were born, when the Chicano movement was emerged and it coalesced around the El Plan Espiritual de Aztlan. Aztlan was looked at as as a nationalist movement, very similar to other nationalist movements that were going around the world. It was a time where the majority of the world, or the brown and black people of the world, were literally colonized, not just, I mean, legally colonized. There were areas that actually belonged to the European powers, and we were looked at as one more nationalist movement wanting some kind of independence. How do you see that concept now? The concept of Aztlan is as far as a struggle.
Sorry, is that question for me?
Yes.
Okay. So I know we in the past we have a little podcast series called Chamaco Talks, and we've done an episode on the history of Aslan. And in that research, um, I found out that there was that nationalist, backbone to the movement of Aslan. And with that, I had carried that perspective for a while of the areas that were conquered by the U.S. Through the Treaty de Hidalgo Guadalupe. But in talking with other mentors and a lot of our people that are working with us, I found out that there was a lot more to that story than we tend to see past. Again, like Lucas mentioned, putting a border on top of another border isn't necessarily the best move, and we're just continuously colonizing people if we continue to carry that out. Especially just acknowledging the people that are here in San Diego, like the Kumeyaay people, to claim that this is now our land would be disrespectful to the work that they have done to take care of their land. So from that point on, my perspective on Aslan became a lot more spiritual, because even when Alurista mentioned it, it was sort of mentioned as a spiritual place, a state of consciousness. And in the group, and at least for myself too, is that's how we see it. It's a state of mind. And to be in Aslan is to be educated about your brothers and sisters and the struggles that we have, and not just within our Chicano community, but also connecting those issues with our Black brothers and sisters, our native our native sisters and brothers, and connecting those struggles within one another, and standing in resistance with them, but also carrying that spiritual piece for ourselves.
Lucas, how do you take those ideas that Christian just brought and attach? How are they attached to the land now? Because ultimately, when we talk about Aztlan, it is a geographical space. It may be defined differently now. It may not just be the Southwest or things like that. But how are the land and the new spirituality related in your eyes?
In my perspective, I think it's that same spirit of, like, wherever we are working and trying to create that space where we can work in solidarity with each other, that's Aslan to me. So like in terms of like physical land, I can see what you're bringing up about like the Southwest or wherever it may be in that conversation. And I look at it more like how people refer to, like, if we look at the Dene and like even saying La Raza, when you say Dene, it means the people. When you say most of the tribes, it translates to like the people. And for me, Aslan is just the title we give it. Like I would call any of the land that I'm on Aslan. And I don't look at it as an erasure. I don't look at it as we're overseeing it and you're not welcome there. I look at it like, okay, I call it Aslan. You may call it Turtle Island. Someone else may call it something else. But for me, this is what I would refer to it as. So I look at it in that sense.
As Chicanos, what, because when we name something, we are giving ourselves permission and the right to do so. How is us being Chicanos tied to our ability or to our right to say this is where I'm standing is Aztlan, no matter where I go?
Well, for me, it's digging into those indigenous pieces. For us as a people, we have that indigenous blood. We are indigenous to the Americas, and unfortunately, historically, it may not have been seen that way. I've even experienced it where if I work with the Kumeyaay brothers and sisters, you're just another Mexican. There's no indigenous blood to you in their perspective. You're just a Mexican. And to me, it's like, it's been this constant battle of, it's like, where do we come together and find that mutual respect for each other as indigenous peoples? Yes, I have Spanish blood, but that wasn't through my choice, and I recognize that, and I do have that, but I also have the indigenous blood, and I'm lucky. I know I can trace mine back, and it's the Mixtecos. So it's having that tie to the land that I feel is what gives us that perspective of like, this is where I'm at. This is my right to call this Aztlan because I'm indigenous to this lands as well.
Mm-hmm. Christian, how do you see the land connection to what you're doing?
I think the land connection is in, the everyday work that we do. I think it's something so simple as keeping Aztlan Libre clean. It's something so simple, but it's something that goes such a long way because it helps us build a connection with the space spiritually and physically. I also think a lot of the work that we have done in the past has to do with connection to the land, and being as respectful as possible with it. We've had gardening projects before in the past. We've hosted kind of park cleanups before in the past, and as Lucas has mentioned, that's all community controlled. So making sure that it's like that Zapata quote: "The people that work the land, it belongs to them." And we have done that in the past, and we've taken those steps. I think that as Chicanos, we can acknowledge that while Aztlan is a geographical space, um, as Chicanos, we can also acknowledge that unfortunately we are a displaced people. Even for myself, I'm Purepecha, I have Purepecha roots, but I don't really have any connection to that because of the cycles of colonialism. But a big goal for the group is to reconnect those pieces for them, and allow them to make those connections back to their tribe and back to their people, but also still doing the work here in the land that we do have, the physical space that we do have available to us.
It sounds like you guys are doing ideological decolonization so that we frame ourselves not within the framework that the colonizers have set down, because basically in the United States, you're an Indian if you have a BIA card, and that's the wrong framework. That's a colonized framework. Um, and what kind of work are you doing besides in your community to fortify that notion, to go beyond San Diego, beyond Aztlan Libre, to promote this idea that we're not saying that this land belongs to us, but we're saying that we belong to this land.
Some of the work that we've been doing is we've been trying to build connections with a lot of other brothers and sisters throughout Aztlan. So like for like myself, I used to take this trip. I haven't done it in the last 2 years, but I take a trip from California. I go through Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, up to Colorado and Utah. And I've made connections throughout the years, and it's sharing this idea because a lot of people they're hungry for knowledge. They're hungry to, tap into their Chicanismo and just learn different history. But I think that we forget how lucky we are. And I mean, me, Christian, and us here in San Diego, because we're surrounded by this. Like, we're surrounded by this history. We're next to it. And we forget how much of a desert it can be in other areas, or also those reminders, like in Arizona, the banning of books and the lack of access. So for us, when we go to those places, we want to make sure that we share that information. So like I've been fortunate enough through my travels to meet like Willie and now I'm recently in connection with Jesus Medel in Houston, and then I met other brothers and sisters in Salt Lake City that are trying to organize and build around a park. I have met the brothers and sisters in El Paso who were mobilizing around Lincoln Park and meeting like Carlos Gaitan and others, and being able to have these conversations and sharing in Denver, meeting different people from like Tim Hernandez to, Arturo Rodriguez and others, and just still learning and them introducing us to other people and being able to share that knowledge and information. And I know with the youth brigade, one of the things they've been trying to do is introduce different chapters throughout Aztlan. And there's one in Santa Barbara, but I think they've been having a hard time trying to maintain the youth there. And it's because again, it's that they're not as close to the cultura as they are, so it's easier for, and we have a space, so these kids are able to get rooted and go somewhere. So for other kids trying to organize, it's been a little difficult, but we share it by just trying to make connections throughout. And we're just, with social media, gift and a curse. The gift part is that, hey, people can reach out, they see us in Aztlan, they say, hey, I want to do something like this too. What are you guys doing? Can you teach us about it? And we just share that information.
Speaking of that, how do people get in touch with you? People who are not right there in your neighborhood. Do you have a website? Do you have social media? How can somebody get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, they can find us either, they can send us an email at rasaservicesaslan@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram at Aztlan Libre. The kids are at Aztlan Youth Brigade. We also have at Aztlan Archives. So we're all on social media. We also have a Facebook page, Aztlan Libre Galeria Mestizaje. So that way you can always reach out there, send us a message, and we'll always respond.
Can you repeat that email?
Yeah, it's Raza, RAZA, services, SERVICS, Aztlan, AZTLAN, @gmail.com.
Muy bien. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys. I don't know where to call you an old timer, Lucas. You have a lot of history, but compared to me, you're not an old timer. You're right there in the trenches. But we definitely can say that Christian is a young whippersnapper. He's says chavo, and still coming up. Some parting words from each one of you for Raza.
Well, I just want to take the time to really thank you and to thank Rasa, for being able to make this connection happen in the first place and to allow us to share a lot of the work that we've done in the past to hopefully inspire Rasa, not just now, but also in the future. Hopefully the goal is that someone can stumble across this interview 10, 20 years from now and find that same spirit of self-determination and that same spirit of wanting to change something in their community. So I just want to give you the thank you for allowing us to share that and just continue to share that message of empowerment with our community in our raza.
One thing I want to say is, if we look at how our history is always taught, it's always from a place of defeat. You always want to talk about the conquest and we should be grateful where we're at now, but we just want to send that reminder to everybody that we have produced major contributions to the world, from the world that I mean, the Mexica were able to build a capital on top of the water, like that type of engineering, looking at the stars and studying can't be forgotten. And I say that to remind people that be proud that your history is strong. We're standing on the ancestors' shoulders, and to remember that like this work doesn't stop. And now more than ever, we have to be ready to start learning from each other and looking at each other as brothers and sisters, especially with the new administration coming in. It's going to get hard and they're going to want us to view each other differently. And I still see a lot of, unfortunately, like with some Chicanos, they view Mexicanos as less than, people that come here seeking better life for their families. They, turn their back on them, or people who once they get their papers, they turn their back on the other brothers and sisters. And it's just remembering, like, do the work, decolonize. Like those borders are not that new. I mean, they're new. They're not that old. Like you look in the grand scheme of time, that thing has just gotten there. So we have to really start decolonizing, doing that work. And it starts with educating ourselves about our history and remembering that, Cardenalismo is still alive and we have to provide that unity and to study documents, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Look at the Plan de Aztlan, look at these other books that have come out by different writers, Message to Aztlan, read the book, read the history, and just keep learning.
Muy bien. All right. Well, it's been an honor and a privilege to interview you guys and to make that connection. And hopefully we will continue the connection and do some work in the future. I will continue to be in touch with you guys. And for the rest of the people watching this, it's rasaservicesaztlan@gmail.com. Muy bien. Christian, Lucas, all right. Viva Aztlán Libre.
Que
Que
viva.
viva.
All right. Lazo Kamati. Adiós.
Lazo Kamati.
Have a good night.